Today, I have the great pleasure of speaking with Kevin Iwamoto, who's the Chief Customer Officer of Bizly. Kevin is an icon in our industry. He's a speaker, he's a singer, he's a writer, he's got a lot of awards. We're going to speak about the industry, we're going to speak about changing career, and we're going to speak as well about the racism against Asian and Pacific Islander people. Enjoy my conversation with Kevin. Hello and welcome to the new episode of the Business of Meaning podcast. And today I am delighted to speak with Kevin Iwamoto. Kevin not only is the Chief Customer Officer for Bizly, but before that, he is a true icon in our industry. He has received so many awards, the MPI Rise Award, GBTA call him the industry icon. And it is truly an icon, but he's also had a career in singing, an international career. So, I mean, Kevin, you have done so many things in your life. I'm delighted you're taking the time to speak with me today. How are you?
I'm good, Eric. Thank you. Thank you for inviting me.
Of course. Now, I don't know where to start, but let's start from the beginning. So okay. What is your journey? How did you get into our industry? I know you had different lives. So let's start with the first one.
Okay. So the first part of my career was actually while I was going to college at the University of Hawaii in Honolulu. And I had actually received a scholarship from Hawaiian Airlines to attend the University of Hawaii Travel Industry Management School, which prepares you for a career not just in travel, but in business in general. Like, you learn marketing and a lot of courses that are very geared towards, business success in general. And then you can customize that towards anything in the hospitality field, whether it be airline or travel agency or hotels or whatever the case may be. So I got a bachelor's degree and graduated. But as I was going to college, I was also making a living and helping to pay my tuition by entertaining and singing in nightclubs and around here and there, and also working part-time for Hawaiian Airlines at the airport. So I was going to school full-time, and I was also performing full-time at nights. I was singing at a nightclub from 10 to 3 a.m. in the morning. My classes would start at 7:30 in the morning, and then I would go to work in the airlines at from 5 to like 9 p.m. in the evening. So it was basically a very full day.
Where did you sleep?
Yeah, I slept some at home, but I also slept a lot in my car before and after classes and in between classes.
Wow.
So it was really like this manic life for till I graduated. And but the entertainment career actually, my business degree actually helped me because my entertainment career was kind of took off. I did like several recordings. I did a lot of collaborations with other artists locally, and I did some work in Japan, but I also did some work in California, and it was a very when you're young, and you're an artist, so to speak, this is kind of all exciting to you, and you kind of commit to it. But like most artists, you focus on the art and you don't focus on the business. Well, I was lucky because I had a business degree, so when the business side of my artistic expression went south, ending up in me suing my manager and getting off their label and creating my own label. I learned early on that, intellectual property and artistic properties solely, you shouldn't give it away. You really need to pay attention. And you really need to not just focus on the art part of the career, but just really focus on the business part of the career, which actually set me up for, my transition into the business travel meetings and events career that happened after I retired from live performing. So you live perform
in many countries in the world. And if I remember one of your posts, you're still selling records in those countries.
Yeah. So, when I was performing, I did 3 vinyl albums. And I know
what it is. I know what a vinyl album is.
If anybody remembers, it was all in vinyl. So you had to literally buy a physical copy if you wanted to hear the music. So, when I retired, I just kind of closed that chapter. And I'm the type of person who when I close a chapter, I don't look back. I just keep moving forwards, right? So I kind of closed that chapter. I didn't really think about the music that I had already created. And in the meantime, you know what happened with the internet and live streaming and
Yep,
MP3,
absolutely.
digital, music got digitized, and I totally missed that. I actually also, now I'm dating myself, I missed the whole CD era too.
Okay.
So, so I had none of my music on CD. Everything was still on vinyl, but some very clever people, with the right equipment, learned how to digitize my vinyl music and put it out there on the internet without my permission. So again, business degree kicks in. I'm saying, wait a minute, this is not right.
Uh,
So during so I always had it on my list that I need to digitize my music and reclaim ownership of it and put it out into the universe in terms of digitizing my music into MP3 files. So I procrastinated because I have a very busy career in the events industry, and
yeah.
never really got around to that. Never saw the need to until I started to see my stuff pop up on YouTube and elsewhere, and I figured, whoa, this is not right. And so the pandemic happened. So during the pandemic, when we were all stuck at home, I decided, you know what, this is a project I'm going to work on. So
Nice.
I did that in 2020. I digitized it. I put it out there, and Eric, it was just purely to regain control over my music catalog and put it out there. So what that meant is I needed to take that vinyl music, get it into digital format, remaster and remix them, completely, because the sounds have changed and you want to keep it as clean and pure as possible. And then put it out there. So what I did was I put together a compilation album of the best of, and I had 10 songs there, and I put it out there. And I just thought, okay, now I'm done. I've re-registered, re-copyrighted, redone everything. I found a distributor who has a global distribution network, which is something I never had access to when I was a performing artist. So that was all new. And literally overnight, that music digitally went out to everywhere, countries in Europe. I actually had quite a large response from Belgium, your former home country.
Really?
Yes, huge. It was huge. And of course, some, responses from Japan, China, the Philippines, but also in Germany and in France and in the UK and all over the US. So this was like, all of a
Wow.
sudden I went from like, okay, I'm done. I put it out there. And all of a sudden you get these reports from all of the distributors and the channels like Apple Music and Amazon and
Yeah.
Spotify, Pandora and whatnot. And all of a sudden I noticed there are like literally hundreds, and eventually grew into thousands, of people listening to the music all over the world, which was done in the 80s, by the way. So it's not new music. It's kind of like a little dated, but still sounds somewhat contemporary. But it was amazing to see that reaction. And so it was so amazing that I put out a follow-up compilation of love songs this year. And that just
Wow.
regenerated a whole nother, like, I believe the last I looked, it was heading towards 15 to 20,000 streams of that. So as an independent artist who no longer
Amazing.
performs, I consider that to be very successful, because I don't have any new music product to put out there. I have no merchandise, and I'm not singing and touring. So I have no means of monetizing that other than people listening and downloading the music.
So when are you going back on tour?
That's not going to happen.
Well, that's fantastic. Congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you.
So you said the career stopped. So you had to sue your manager, create your own label. At that moment, what do you decide? What do you think? You have this experience, of course, with being on stage, which I'm sure is helping you with.
Tremendously, yeah.
When you're speaking a lot and
Yeah.
represent a lot of people.
Yeah.
But then what was the transition, and how did you get into the meetings and event industry?
So, okay, so that's a long journey. So when I retired from show business, so to speak, I had moved from Honolulu to Los Angeles, and I had some pretty good contacts made there, and I did some work, and actually quite a bit of work in Los Angeles, live performing and doing showcases and stuff like that, writing songs for myself mostly. And I was getting like, it's a real grind, because there's no guarantee, and you're only as good as your last engagement. And
Yeah.
I'm the type of person as you get older. So it was fine when you're in your 20s, but when you start to head towards your 30s, you kind of want to see more financial stability. And it was just so up and down. Like I was afraid to make any kind of big expenditure because I wasn't sure whether I was going to make enough money in the next month to pay for that. So I started to look for, full-time work to augment the entertainment career. But I just got to this point where, and I know we're going to talk about this later, but I got to this point where this whole, you have to understand in the 80s, there was no well-known Asian performers or groups, not like today, right? And if you look at the genesis of Asian Pacific Islander performers, there were really limited success, mostly on a regional basis. And the ones who made it nationally or globally were very few. You could count on one hand, right? So I think I made the decision to leave after I had a really high profile meeting with a very top entertainment manager who managed several male artists, very popular male artists. And he listened to my music and he basically said, you're a very talented person. He said, you're also a pretty good songwriter. He says, but there's just no market for an
People
Asian
like
male.
you.
Yes, people who look like you. He actually said those words. So people who look like you, there's actually no market, and I don't have a playbook to use.
Wow.
I'm interested in managing you. He says, but I really don't know how to. I think it's a disservice because I don't know how to manage you. If you were white or you were black, he said it would be much easier for me.
Wow.
But you're Asian. He says, and I just really don't know how to market you. And he says, and I know that none of the major labels would want to pick up your catalog because they themselves wouldn't know how to market you either. So I said, so what would you suggest I do? He says, you could join a group and you could be one of the lead singers. He says, you could be a background singer for well-known artists and go on tour with them. He said, or you could just write and compose songs for other artists and, help them record their songs, based on your songwriting.
Was the first time in your life that you were confronted with racism like that?
Yes, pretty much. And that's a really good point. Because remember, I grew up in Honolulu, Hawaii, where, there's a lot of Asian people, a lot of Polynesian Pacific Islander people. So we are not the minority there. We're actually the majority. So, that actually was one of the first times I was actually confronted with some form of racism. But, I was raised to kind of like look beyond that and just say, okay, well, that was to be expected. So what do I do next? Right. That's how my parents raised me. So I just, decided at that point that I need to commit to something else. And I've had like 10 years of doing this with some level of success. And maybe it's time to pack that in. So I moved to California and had those type of experiences and I kind of packed it in. And then I moved into the business travel side of the business and ended up being a travel manager for various companies like the Walt Disney Company and Hewlett Packard, and had great deal of success there with managing global travel programs for big corporations. And then from there, I inherited meetings and events when I was at Hewlett Packard and had some great deal of success in kind of co-founding or initiating the whole strategic meetings management movement, wrote a book about that, got a lot of recognition for it, and actually helped to institutionalize that as a corporate standard for how big corporations and enterprises should manage their meetings programs on a global level.
With our friend Betsy Bonduran.
With my dear friend Betsy Bonduran, who was a very early adapter of it.
Yep.
And so we built a coalition of subject matter experts around it, hit the road and kind of evangelized that. I evangelized it around the world. Won some awards along the way for it, and kind of helped to make that a corporate standard. So I moved from that career. I used what I learned from my entertainment career, and to your point, Eric, it made me very comfortable on stage. I was elected president of the National Business Travel Association, which is now the Global Business Travel Association, and I'm known as the 9/11 president because 2 months after I was elected president of NBTA, 9/11 happened. The industry came to a grinding halt, and it was up to me and my board of directors to kind of re-energize travel, business travel, and leisure travel, and get people traveling again and not afraid to fly. And I had a whole bunch of depositions from Congress as to where the industry was and what needed to happen to get it back up and running again. We had a collapse in our sponsorship, which, for an association is almost like a death knell, because when you're not flying or you're not getting any business, you're not going to spend tens of thousands of dollars in sponsorships on a business travel association. So, it was trying to get them back engaged and kind of convincing them that they need to reinvest because this is not going to last forever. And, when business comes back, you want to pick it up where it is. So it was a lot of work, but I had to pull on a lot of my own life experiences on, people saying no and how to get past that and how to get them to see the bigger picture on things and kind of collaborate with people, knowing fully well that you yourself as a single individual can't get people to a certain place. You have to lead people there. So I really had to tap into leadership skills that I didn't even know I had, but had to kind of dive deep into those things, and overall, when I look back at it, we did a lot, but it was a big collaboration and it was a big effort to kind of just keep your eye on the bigger picture and kind of drive people to that vision and try to bring them along for that journey. And so those are very valuable skills to learn, I think.
Absolutely. I don't remember who said that, but something along the lines of that's in time of crisis that true leaders emerge.
Yes, I'm a big subscriber to that. And when I went to Wharton for my master's program, we had a class on leadership, and that came up, and I could certainly relate to that because that was my experience. That was my story, at GBTA. But what I did learn was if you can pull an industry out of a major crisis, global crisis like that, then you can really do anything. There is no problem that is unsolvable, right? You just, the dynamics and you know what has to happen to get people there. And so when SMMP was launched and nobody was adopting it, I kind of knew what we had to do. And so I hit the road along with several other subject matter expert evangelists that we made it a point. I met with MPI, I met with different association groups, and I convinced them that they shouldn't recreate what we already created. So it was just, same concept, but different, objective, put it that way.
Nice. When you say the word evangelist, I went back to 1988. I was a student in a conference, and in the Silicon Valley, a friend of mine, Thierry Doyen, was working for Apple.
Yeah.
And I asked him, so what are you doing? And he said, I'm a software evangelist.
Oh, I love
said,
that.
What is that? He said, you've seen The Preacher on TV? I said, yes. I'm taking care of all the production and the software behind it. I said, really? And then he started laughing. That's when I understood what evangelizing means.
Yeah.
Your point of SMMP.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So today you are the Chief Customer Officer of Bizly. So what does Bizly do and what is your role exactly?
So I'm a Chief Customer Officer, Head of Enterprise. I've had a great deal of experience on the enterprise side and the customer side as well. So, having been a customer myself. So I kind of lead those efforts and kind of guide sales and customer success teams to kind of manage oversight of our customers and make sure they're taken care of, making sure that their needs are being met. Also helping our sales group with my huge network of contacts that I have in the industry. I feel so blessed, Eric, that I've been also a personal brand evangelist and writing a book about that as well. That's available on Amazon. But I was so lucky that I stumbled into awareness of how important your personal brand and reputation is. And it's so lucky early on, I kind of adapted certain principles that really kind of guided me through my career. And, through that, I've been very blessed with an immense network of contacts, not just at the highest levels of the industry, but also in the mid levels of the industry and even at the lower levels of the industry. But it's like the whole power of a network is how you use that for the common greater good of everybody involved, right? And that's always been like a core guiding star for me is, focusing on not what's good for you selfishly, but what's good for everybody else. And I've always been driven that way. So I manage and view everything from that lens. And that has given me, a platform and an influencer role that I don't take lightly. I take that very seriously and I hold myself accountable and responsible for that. And, I treat it like it was a gold mine, because it is. It's a gold mine, right? And so it's, how do we engage with this community in a way that has integrity, but also provides benefit for, our end users. And so I challenge our people to kind of look at things through that lens, and not, I need to make a sale, or, we need to do X, Y, Z, right? So a little bit less emphasis around the revenue part of it, more emphasis around the humanity of it. So
very nice. And I know that the topic of diversity, quality, inclusion is very important to you.
yes,
I had a few weeks ago Jevon McCormick, the CEO of Scribe, speaking
yeah,
about that. And I really encourage people to listen. This episode 135, Jevon McCormick is
yeah.
phenomenal. Can we talk a little bit about your view on diversity, equality, inclusion, and also, and that would be the second part, but the racism against Asian and Pacific Islander people,
Yeah.
which probably in the culture, it's not as okay as other culture to speak up,
Yes.
but that's definitely there.
Yeah.
And so let's start first with DEI.
Yeah.
And then let's continue with racism against Asian and Pacific Islander people, and what could be done to fight that.
Yeah. So for me, DEI awareness comes at different points in people's career. And I'll admit, some people get it from the very beginning of their career when they see racism directed towards them. Some people get it mid-career where, they are advancing their career and all of a sudden they hit a glass ceiling and they suspect that maybe some of that is race-related. And some of it get it in the later part of their career. I fall into the later part of the career. I was so focused on being successful because that's how I was that's what was culturally embedded in me from my parents and other mentors that I had, that I was just heads down focused on elevating myself in this chosen career of the first business travel, then meetings and events community. And so what really brought this to my attention, where I started to pay more attention to it, was I was part of several boards, advisory boards and things for various associations and different media groups and whatnot. Very blessed to be asked to participate at a board level. And I don't know what it was, but I just started to look around the room and started to realize, wow, there is like no other Asian Pacific Islander in this room. There's maybe one, if at all, any African American people in this room.
Mm-hmm.
There's little to no Latino, Latinx folks in this room. And this is a room full of middle-aged, sometimes younger, sometimes older white men. And to some degree, white women. And also women were also underrepresented too. But when they were represented, they were white women. Mm-hmm. So it started to dawn on me, why? Why is that happening? Why is there not more diversity and representation? And that's why I've adopted this #representation matters mantra. And I stick that in a lot of my social media communications, because if you don't see people that look like you, who are culturally similar to you in the room, then you have no baseline to compare. And those voices are missing from the discussion. And that is very important. And that's when I first noticed it. What really accelerated my proactiveness around DEI awareness, especially focusing on the Asian Pacific Islander community, is being underrepresented, is when all of the hate rhetoric started towards Chinese Americans and Asians in general. And there started to be these vicious attacks on Asian Americans.
Because of COVID.
Because of COVID, yeah. A lot of it was also politically driven as well, right? It started there and it just kind of like took off. And that's very easy, as you know, in a polarized community, that's very easy to do, scapegoating people who look different than you. It's how the Jewish community was segmented out. It was, how now Asians, how African Americans, or Blacks in general are segmented out, Latinos, etc. It's easy to do scapegoat when people look different than you.
Yeah.
And so
the thing with Chinese people, even people living in China that are not Asian. I mean, they're
Yeah.
Asian, but not American who are Asian.
Yeah.
Even that, when I compare that to what's happening today with Russia,
Yeah.
Putin is a criminal.
Yeah.
But does that mean that you have to stop listening to Tchaikovsky in concert hall? It's to make the difference between the leaders and the people.
Yeah, exactly right. Exactly right. And also, when you look at a person who is Chinese, and you know this, like I know this, there is a big difference between a Chinese American who's maybe third generation or even fifth generation and born and raised in America versus a Chinese person born and raised in China.
The first one is an American of Chinese descent.
Correct. So for all intents and purposes, for people to realize that that person in here is American. They're not Chinese. I mean, they are, but they're not. They're Chinese here, but they're not here. And so, like, speaking for myself, I'm a third generation Japanese American, and I come from a mixed blended family. But, I still get surprised when people ask me, what country are you from? Or, oh, wow, you speak English so well. Or how do you know so much about football or basketball? Or
you speak English so well, I don't get it. Trust me, with my accent.
But, and so initially, when you start to get that, and again, going back to, I never really got that in Hawaii. I got that when I moved to California. I used to kind of like get annoyed, and I kind of like I would revert back to my cultural upbringing, which is just ignore it, just let it go, right? So I stopped doing that when all these Asian attacks started to happen, because I realized that I have an influencer position, I have a platform, I am a publicly known person. It's up to me to start to lead the efforts to educate and communicate why that's not okay.
And speak up.
And to speak up, which, to your point earlier, Asian people in general, culturally, the languages may be different, but culturally they're told to work hard, don't speak up, don't draw attention to yourself, just be successful in what you do, right? Mm-hmm. So that is culturally embedded in Asian people, whether they're American-born Asian or whether they're in Asia, Asian people. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So initially, I reacted the way that was culturally embedded in me. Now I've taken it a point to stop and educate people. So when people ask me, where are you from? I tell them, I explain to them, I take the time to explain. I was born and raised in Hawaii. I am a third generation Japanese American. What that means is my grandparents emigrated to Hawaii. My parents were born and raised in Hawaii. I was born and raised in Hawaii. The children are fourth generation. But from my parents onward, including me, we are, for all intents and purposes, we are American. We may not look like what you think an American should look like, but we are American. And so by doing that, they start to realize, oh, just because they're Asian doesn't mean they're from Asia. You know what I mean? They don't speak English, right? And there's subtle things that, you have to, like, whether it's a friend or not, you have to correct people, because they don't, there's this whole unconscious bias thing that goes on, like, oh, you're Asian, you must be really good at math. So Kevin, why don't you do the accounting? Math was my worst subject in school. So that's not a good stereotype, And the other thing too is, I was standing in a buffet line at a conference. And one of my friends, said to me, oh, look, Kevin, they have sushi. You must be so happy. And I'm thinking, okay, normally you would just slough that off and say, yeah, I love sushi, right? So I now take the opportunity to say, well, I can understand why you say that, but truth be known, I actually like Italian food really a lot, and I like French food a lot.
Well, I have another answer. If, for future people talking like that, you must like sushi, and you go, why?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's a very good response. I'm going to use that. I'm going to borrow that from you. But I take the time to educate and point out, you may not realize that statement is kind of offensive or insulting, but just to kind of make people more sensitive and culturally aware.
Yeah, that's a good point. Now, you said that the first time, obviously, it was when you were speaking with this manager of their record company. As you know, I'm very vocal when it comes to anti-Semitism, obviously with the history of my family and why we moved to America.
Yeah.
what were the different moments where you start really realizing that of all the different form of racism, there's also racism against specifically Asian people, Asian Pacific Islander people?
Yeah.
And what would you say to someone listening today that could be done, should be done in the future to avoid that?
Yeah. So there's several things. I think a lot of it has to do with education and awareness, right? It's like pointing out the inequities and stuff. I think the biggest thing for me is representation. If people don't see people who look like me participating at a board level or at a senior executive level of a company, they're not going to aspire to try to emulate that same position. There's nobody to, they can look towards to say, well, if so-and-so can do this, then so can I, right? And so like, I'll give you a great example. I'll go back to my entertainment roots. So from the time I was performing in the 80s, which was 30 plus years ago to today, the biggest group in the world is a Korean group called BTS. I'm sure you've heard of them, right? They're very famous outside of Korea. They're one of the first to kind of make a breakthrough. Until BTS became a worldwide profitable enterprise, nobody in entertainment would even consider an Asian group ascending to that level. But now that they did, now you have a lot of Asian groups out there trying to get to that level. And you also have Asian performers trying to get to that level. Because why? Because somebody else went there and got great success. But what that says to the industry is, doesn't matter if they're Asian now anymore. They can make billions of dollars if you market them correctly and they have the right level of talent, right, and appeal. So let's move that into the movie industry and entertainment industry. You have to take the wins where you got it, right? So remember a few years ago when the Oscars were hashtagging Oscars so white. So, who raised their hand and came to the forefront of that discussion? It was the African American community, right? But if you think about it, African Americans have been actually noticed as successful in, winning Oscars and getting nominated and stuff like that, right? Could they have more? Absolutely. But you want to know who's more underrepresented in that category than African Americans? It's the Asians. It's the Asian Pacific Islanders. And yet you have big stars like The Rock, who has a Samoan background.
Yeah,
right?
Of course.
So why is it that only until last year, there was never a Best Actor nominee who was of Asian descent, right? And why is it that it took almost 20, 30 years before an Asian woman won a Best Supporting Actress? There's been less than a handful of Asians nominated for Oscars, and those who have won is even less than that, right? So if you don't have representation, then most Asian American, Asian Pacific Islander actors are going to think, I can never be a lead actor, but I can make a living in a supporting role. See what I'm saying? Because there is no person or blueprint who's there that they can point to and say, oh, well, if so-and-so can make it there, then so can I.
No, I totally get your point. And it's totally obvious. I just hope that the future Asian actor that would win Oscar will not do like their predecessor that are not Asian and tell the entire world how they should be living. I'm just kidding. But when you hear all those people in Hollywood, I refer to Ricky Gervais at the Golden Globe. I love that. But to come back to this topic, which is very important. When you translate everything you just say about the entertainment world, Hollywood, to the business, representation is definitely one thing. And I love your hashtag representation matters. What else do you think could be done and should be done in associations, in our industry, in corporation, to basically fight all form of racism, but starting with racism against Asian and Pacific Islander people?
Yeah. So I think that representation starts with a voice, right? So whether that voice be through a subgroup within an association, a separate group that I'm one of the co-founders of, like API Event Profs, it's starting the dialogue. It's starting accepting the responsibility for education and awareness. But it's also like creating easier paths to the top, right? And so like, I am a byproduct of many mentors who mentored me and gave me great advice. And so I try to pay that forward by taking on and mentoring some very promising folks who've actually ascended to quite high level ranks within our industry. So I'm very proud of them. But now what I've focused on in this last part of my career is really focusing on the underrepresented, meaning, the African Americans, the Asian Pacific Islanders, the Latinos, who really need to have a voice at the upper echelon of our industry, but currently don't have a voice, because I want to see them represented. Yeah. So, it's a sad thing, because when I retire, last year, a very good friend of mine, David Kong, who was the CEO of Best Western Hotels, he was the only Asian executive at the most senior ranks in the hospitality industry. And when he retired, I remember we were having a conversation, and I said, you understand that when you go, there's no representation, right? And to the degree you can maybe mentor somebody to take your place that maybe is not a white person, or somebody who's more representative of a diverse community, that would be a great service to the industry. And I feel the same level of responsibility for myself. Yeah. Because in the technology industry, there may be some Indian senior executives, but there really is no Asian. Very rare. Find an Asian Pacific Islander at that level. And so I think it's important that as we pass the baton to the next generations, that we look to carve and create a pathway that's easier for the underrepresented to be represented and move into those roles. And so I think a lot of it has to do with mentoring programs, and whether it's at a corporate level or association level, I think that is really important, because what really paved the way for me was some very great mentors who gave me the confidence to move forward and really take on the challenge of, moving into an executive role, and giving me the confidence to do that. I think that's very important.
Thank you very much for that, Kevin. And I would add to as well, besides or next to Asian, Pacific Islander people, African American, Latinos, obviously LGBTQ women, yes, and also Jewish people. People are always surprised when I ask them,
yeah,
do you know how many Jews there are in the world? And I'm giving like 100 millions, billions. There's 16 million Jews in the world. Yeah. And so when I hear of association or corporation that are having meeting on Yom Kippur,
yes,
because that's the only day that would fit. You know what? And those same association and those same corporation are talking and putting DEI initiative on their website, and I call bullshit. You don't have to virtue signaling. Just do the right thing internally.
Just do the right thing. They have to, and this goes back to cultural sensitivity and awareness, right? Like we have a mutual friend in Joan Eisenstadt, who I absolutely love and adore. And Joan is really good at elevating conversations or pointing things out that may be uncomfortable for people to acknowledge, but they should pay attention and they should acknowledge. And God bless her for doing that. And God bless you for doing that, Eric, because it drives me equally crazy when you're talking about DEI, and then you have one panel on DEI and the rest of it is the standard middle-aged white men and women panels. You know what I mean? It's like, you can't talk about DEI unless you start to walk the talk. Take a look at your content. And then take a look at how diversified are the voices that are talking about that content, because representation matters. And so that drives me crazy. And I'm like you, I pointed out saying, gee, do you think you could have been more diversified in your keynote speakers and, your panelists and stuff like that? Or, when this whole Yom Kippur thing came out, I was outraged. It's like, why would you, if you want a successful conference, why would you successfully eliminate all of the Jewish attendees who, even if they wanted to attend, they can't, because it's on Yom Kippur? You know what I mean? It's like,
because that's the only day that fit. No, whatever. I think we fully agree with that.
But it's like the sensitivity, and it's like also handicapped too, right? It's like they have these conferences and they're supposed to be like sensitive towards, the physically challenged community, right? And yet they have stairs and they have, things like that. So it's if you're going to be sensitive to diets, and this is my big, nothing against vegan people or people who have like specific diets, but if you pay so much attention on the diet but you ignore the other cultural sensitivities that should be required in consideration. That makes no sense to me whatsoever.
I agree.
Right?
And to finish on a note of a little bit of humor, Tracy Sukrat, who's always speaking very well about food allergies and preparation. I saw her at IMX and I said, Tracy, I'm confused. And she said, what? If I have a vegan person coming for dinner at home and they have flowers with them, is this a gift or are they bringing dessert?
You're so bad.
And she looked at me and said, you stupid. I said, yeah, I am.
You're so bad.
Kevin, it's been a pleasure speaking with you. Thank you so much for speaking up, for being who you are.
Thank you.
And for being a voice. Continue to do that. And I look forward to seeing you live again very soon.
Definitely. Thank you, Eric.
Kevin, thank you so much for coming on the show today and for speaking up. I truly love who you are, what you do, and keep doing it, my friend. Thank you so much. Ladies and gentlemen, if you want to connect with me, please follow me on LinkedIn or connect with me on LinkedIn or join my Facebook group, www.evenbusinessformula.com/group. And if you enjoyed this conversation, please share it with your network. Thank you.